11 December 1936, there's another announcement, and this is again in the Los Angeles Times. It's called Gala Events Draw Throng to Deserts, to Desert. Horse races, theater opening, and dog show highlight weekend, with mention of Max, Emily, and the Chancellors. So I'll read a quote. Mr. and Mrs. Philip Chancellor of Hollywood, who were guests of Baron and Baroness von Romberg at El Medor, that's a hotel or was a hotel in Palm Springs, attended the harness races last Sunday afternoon. So the point of this is I recall that Emily is occasionally taking this dog or her dogs to these dog shows, and they're around that. So it's kind of strange. So we think that Elza is a solid anti-Nazi, yet she's around Emily, who and Max, who are starting to show symbols, apparently supporting Nazism, swastikas for this, but something more is going on with this. All right, then we get to 1937, and this is where it gets nuts. The brother of actor Victor McLaglen, Leopold McLaglen, he in about April 1937, he starts some communication, if you will, or working for Philip, first presumably teaching him jiu-jitsu. As I understand it, McLaglen, Leopold, was kind of a World War I British. I don't know if I wouldn't say hero, but he was in there, and he received some recognitions, and then he moved to Hollywood for that. And so he was teaching jiu-jitsu, and it turned into Philip, who was a Navy reservist, and Philip was kind of a bit of an adventurer. I mentioned him going to Alaska with Max, but also he went to Borneo, I think, trying to photograph the Komodo dragon, something like that, for that. So he was very adventurous, and he was trying to do undersea photography. So McLaglen, Philip gets more interested in spying. Spying because he's also interested in becoming more involved in the U.S. naval intelligence sphere. So I think he's working on a book. So I think what it is he wants to do that and then position himself in the Navy. But that's just my interpretation. But in any event, there's involvement where McLaglen is offering information about communist activity, and that's Hollywood Anti-Nazi League, or an element of it, perhaps. Check that, and I think maybe in Nazis as well. So in any event, there's some kind of mess up. You can read about it in the chapter in Hitler in Los Angeles. McLaglen turns around and is apparently trying to extort $20,000 from Philip for unpaid stuff, and there are spy reports out of the it's in Hitler in Los Angeles, the Jewish spy-led archive in Los Angeles, where McLaglen is actually a rabid Nazi, presumably British Nazi, and he wants to use the money to slaughter 22 Hollywood Jews and 2 people friendly with Jews. Big names: Jack Benny, Gloria Stuart, all of that. So there ends up, Philip is reported to contact, I think, the police. There's a 6-week investigation. McLaglen gets arrested. So there is a court trial from, let's see, it's from about October 1937 until March 1938 for that. The trial itself, and the court record should be pulled to find out exactly what was going on there. News reports always provide a summary. Court records are really, that's the documentation. There can be statements and all sorts of things for that. I haven't pulled that yet, which I think I might need to. So, all right. So he gets arrested in October, and then it takes a while for the case to happen. I think it's March the following year. And what's very odd about it, as you're kind of, it's such a serious matter, and and is that you also see through this social activity in the newspaper on another page with Emily, Elza, Max, and Philip together, even photographs. It's quite remarkable. They're going through this case. Philip is a key witness for the prosecution, and oh, by the way, here they are Saturday night sitting at a table with a few friends for that. One of the interesting photos in it, towards as the case kind of starts, is with Philip and Elza, and Elza is holding a pistol, and the two of them are looking at the mark, and she apparently hit the bullseye for that. So it's a bit weird, because in this context. All right, so basically, the assassinations don't happen for that, and McLaglen is found guilty, and he's given a choice. He can go to prison for, I think, 5 years, or he can go back to Britain, and he goes back to Britain. Now, one thing that I reviewed was there's a I think it's 1938, yeah, so we're in 1938 now. Before this, while all this is happening, it's announced that Elza is going for a screen test in 3 articles. It's also mentioned in a letter between Emily and her archive and her sister Jane. And, but nothing happens. There might have been an issue, as some people know, of silent film stars going to talking films for the accents and other things. All right, so next thing. All right, there's a 1939 FBI file on Philip. It doesn't have many pages, so it's thought to be a false flag. It's in the sphere of espionage. So, but again, we think, me and a contact, we think it's a false flag because it's so small. We won't know until we see it. It's being declassified and available in, I think, 3 years. But what may have happened is that he was sitting at a table or met someone that triggered it. And it was small, and then it got dismissed. Now, during this time, just so it's known, because they're friends. They're like 2 couples that are friends. It's totally crazy with Max. Max has German citizenship. He builds a house. His magazine with Emily shuts down abruptly in 1936. In 1937, I believe, he starts building a house. And apparently, and that's in documentation on the house, see Volker Welter's book. I recall that he started building it officially on Hitler's birthday, officially, for that. And at the same time, a couple months later, he's expatriating from, applied for American citizenship and expatriating from Germany in effect. So, totally mixed messages there. So again, it's this idea of putting forth a symbol to satisfy someone, but then, this other stuff going on here. And if I didn't mention, when Emily took that, named the dog swastika, if you look in the magazine, it's around that time or shortly after that she has on the magazine Jewish names on the front and back cover. So on the back you have I think it's a Weinstein's ad, and on the front is her graphic designer, graphics guy, Oppenheim, who I think is young, and he was Jewish. He was buried in a Jewish cemetery. So she's putting these names on the front and back, while at the same time she has just signed up to have a dog named Swastika. So there's mixed messaging here. I don't think she played both sides, because, if you were orientated towards Nazism, why would you do that? I mean, why would you do that? You just wouldn't. You would just go no. So, so there's that as well. So, in late March 1938, so this is right before McLaglen. It's right in the middle of his trial. That's quite interesting. The U.S. becomes a national story. Learns about the Fromm murders in Texas. Now, there's a book, I think it's called Fetch the Devil. It's Richardson, maybe. I read it last month, and it's quite interesting because the guy who wrote it, he passed away. I think was like a police, he was an investigator of some kind. And it was in Texas, and it was basically, there was a German, he was either ethnic German or German American. I don't think he had the passport, or I don't know how long he'd been in America. He was a businessman, and he was in the construction explosives industry, which is interested to Nazi agents, if you will. And his wife and his daughter were traveling in a new car. They had a bit of money, and all the way to South Carolina to meet the oldest daughter. And there was a problem with the car, presumably. But in short, they got murdered outside of El Paso, Texas, and it's thought that the German consul in San Francisco had something to do with it, either through some pressure or there was a movement of documents. Remember, documents are not only what you might think of as political, but also industry. Something like not only plans of technology, but also plans for sabotage. And they were moving through El Paso because it was the easiest way to move them in bulk and get them to Germany. So, but it's a fascinating book. It gets going about the California stuff midway for that. So that happened, the murders happened at the end of 38, I recall. Yeah, 38. And then McLaglen, he gets sent back to Britain. And one has to think, how did, McLaglen was around some very rough characters. We're talking thugs and Nazis. That's we see in Hitler in Los Angeles. How did they feel? What did they know about Philip Chancellor and his sphere? They're in the courtroom and everything else. And we've got, Manfred von Killinger, the German consul in San Francisco, who's a bit of a thug and reputed to be a former assassin. And then afterward, I think it's in 44, he's sent to Romania because he's just too nuts for California. They had to bring someone else in. He ends up killing his staff and himself. So imagine you have a German passport and you're in California and you've got to go in this office. It's very intimidating. It's not known at this juncture from the Emily Mack side which consulate they had to deal with. I would not assume, Los Angeles was closer, therefore they dealt with them. No, you'd have to look at the organization of how it was set up at that time. And also, I understand von Killinger had influence into Los Angeles. All right. So, so then afterward, so that's April, and in June, I think it's the 4th or the 5th, Max dies in a suspicious plane crash on the East Coast, but there are ties. The Nazi agents are communicating with each other to a certain extent, especially if they have a hit on someone. So, so that's why I mentioned From. Something odd happened here, and I bet if we look, there were some other things maybe happening with it. So, we just don't know what happened with Max's crash. It went through. There was mixed reporting on the ground. Then it went locally, and then it got bumped up to the state level, and then got kind of buried, if you will. I was trying to get the file. They didn't have it, and the New Jersey Archive. It was supposedly, if anything, moved to the new federal agency, and I wasn't able to find it for that. So it could be there. So lots of questions on this. All right, so in recap, Elza. Well, if you want to know more about Elza, like to get to the bottom of this, what was she doing? Was she part of, assisting in, American intelligence, through this? And that becomes more of an issue, which I'll discuss I'm going to do another one. One has to do with Leni Riefenstahl, Emily meets Leni Riefenstahl for an hour, and then also with the event for the Duke of Saxe-Coburg, in Gotha in April 1940. Elza is definitely involved in that event, and I think she may have something to do with Emily meeting Leni Riefenstahl. Film people will kind of understand why. Okay, so after the war starts, okay, so people, I don't know, you'd have to determine what you think of Elza, and I think we'd agree more research is needed. But I'd like to point some other things out. Elza was also friendly with Emily's older sister named Jane Noble. Jane Noble was married to Bennett Noble, who was a Navy guy in the sphere of U.S. naval intelligence, and for a time his boss was the famous Elza M. Zacharias. Okay, so she's friends with Jane. All right, and she's basically a likely lady spy, because if you read about U.S. naval intelligence, they were understaffed. They go to events together, and they compare notes. You look at this one, you look at that one. It's kind of like people watching or something like that, but more intensely. And Ellis wrote a book called Secret Missions After the War, and he talks about some of this, but he doesn't go after the Nazi stuff. It's more the Japanese stuff for it. But he talks about his wife, on how she was at times spying for him at events, at least for that. So the thing is that Elza is friends with Jane, and Captain Zacharias' wife is named Claire. So after the war gets going, you find things in the social news that Jane and Elza are at a luncheon that was organized by Claire Zacharias in San Diego, the naval base, or near the naval base where they lived. And one of them has a lunch in either Jane and Elza's honor or Elza's honor. I think it's both. Okay? So if Elza was a bit dodgy, why is the head of U.S. naval intelligence publicly in the newspaper, the wife of, giving her a lunch in her honor, which may be in that social way, because they did that kind of thing. But what was said at this thing? Maybe there was a bit more. So so that's where let me see if I have anything else here. Okay, yeah. All right, so after around Yalta, so we're now at the end of the war, towards the end of the war, at the Yalta Conference, Elza and Philip get a divorce. He remarries quickly and then has a Mexican wife, and he moves to Mexico after the war. Elza later remarries to Howard Splain. He had something to do with Standard Oil, I think one of the original founders or something like that. Elza died in February 1968 and is buried in Tucson. So there you have it. That's that's stuff that I've seen over 4 years. If you find anything out, if you could share it. I'm trying to get down to at a deep level with Emily to find out, because it's not confirmed, but I think that she was involved in intelligence, and that she was informal spy, and she's been dead since 1987, and I think she was a liberal person. And imagine that you die and all that, and then later people put 10 pieces together in a messy situation and go, well, wow, there's this pro-Nazi cloud over her head. So every little piece of information helps clarify the situation, and Elza is obviously key. So thank you for your time, and there's the brief.